Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we have a mini Phalaenopsis orchid. This one is a no ID from a grocery store. So this one is actually one of the first orchids I purchased when I was living in New York. So this orchid and I have gone way back, at least 4, maybe 5 years. So if we go back in time, this orchid was growing lots of new leaves and roots back in September 2019 after it finished its previous bloom, and then it was the end of 2019 that I realized that this orchid was producing 2 spikes, which is quite amazing because this orchid has never put out 2 spikes before. It had always been one single spike. Even when I first purchased it from the store, it was a 1 spike bloomer. So this orchid is surprisingly outperforming itself. So this orchid, because it's been 3-4 years, so if we take a look at the media, well, first of all, it's in a clay pot. And then at that time, when I was repotting this orchid, it was back in New York, my New York life. I was experimenting with different kinds of mixture of medium substrate. So I think it has a mixture of clay pebbles, lava rock, sphagnum moss, and maybe even some leftover bark chips. So it was a really mixture of everything, a lot of things. It did well, it did okay, and last year and the year before it all bloomed. This year, first time 2 spikes, like I said. But if you look at the media, and later you'll see the roots, the older roots are looking a little sad and old. So I think after this orchid finished this blooming cycle, I will have to give it a repot because it's been 3-4 years. So it's definitely due for a repot, fresh media. I don't know if I will continue to use the clay pot for this one. I may have to just kind of see the amount of root system that this one has, because with old media you kind of have to assume that the roots inside the media is probably gonna need some trimming, and when you trim off unnecessary roots or died off roots, you may not have enough to go to up pot this orchid. So if that's the case, I'll continue to use this container, but otherwise I may have to up pot it just to allow for it to graduate onto a different container. Clay pot is very nice material, and this orchid always gets 1/4 cup of water even though it's a smaller container, and I can tell you why. Because clay pots are really porous, so it evaporates water much faster. So if I only give it 1/8 of a cup, it may not have enough to last for an entire week. So I usually give this orchid 1/4 cup, and then I let the excess water be absorbed by the clay material, and that helps retain some moisture, some water. But then if the orchid needs additional moisture, it's there. And it's not too much excess if this orchid doesn't want it. Now this orchid did have a little bit of bud blast on one of the spikes toward the end of it, and it's normal because you can't not have any bud blast for some orchids. And sometimes it's just really, environmental changes. It could be temperature, it could be humidity, provided that you don't move around your orchid too much when they're in buds. And also, if there's nothing stressing this orchid out, for example, root rot or stem rot, crown rot, that kind of thing, or pest infestation, then, it's environmental. If it's not pest or moving around, then it's environmental. So this orchid this year, when it first put out the spikes, I did try to, use a little bit of tool, a couple sticks, to help these two orchids grow its spike slightly upward, and then I let it kind of fall free, kind of pendant freely, or however it wants to, so it's not directly poking out toward the light source. Last year, I let it kind of grow however it liked, and it took up a lot of space, and I had to keep this orchid at the edge of my grow rack for that reason. So here's a video clip of the orchid in bloom, and if you look at the media, it's looking a little sad, it's looking a little old, so I think it's definitely time for a repot. I just don't know what container and the size of container I should use, so I will have to wait and see how much root system is in the pot. I mean, I do have enough area roots, but I'm still debating if I should continue to use the clay pot or just move it to a similar size plastic cup. And speaking of plastic cup, this cup is specifically for this orchid. I don't share cups, so this one is specific for this orchid, and I kind of use this, I sit the clay pot inside this plastic cup, so kind of use this plastic cup as a saucer. But when I need to soak this orchid, it's great. I just pour the water in, let it soak, let it hang out, and then drain it out. Pour water out from the plastic cup, so it's quite convenient, and I really enjoy this whole double cup method. It keeps my grow space to be pretty clean too. Now here is the bonus footage. I went back to my file and found a footage of this orchid bloom. This is back in 2019, so last year's blooming video. And you can see here the flower spike kind of poked out, and then I let it grow freely, so it had to be at the edge of the grow rack, otherwise it's just gonna be touching the divider or touching the surface, and it took a little bit more room than I liked. But other than that, I mean, pendant look and feel of the flower spike is still something I adore dearly, but sometimes in order to save some space, you really do have to train your flower spike a little bit more. Another trick you can use is when the flower spikes are growing, make sure that you have light source coming from directly above. If that's the case, they also tend to grow upward a little bit more, and then would then bend and pen down that way. So this orchid also has another interesting aspect to its bloom, and that is last year and this year also, they would bloom out and then wait for a little bit, a couple weeks, and then start to grow 1 or 2 or 3 buds toward the end of the flower spike and then bloom again. So this year it did the same thing, but I unfortunately misplaced some of the photos. I'm still looking for them, and if I found them, I will make another quick update video on this orchid's subsequent bloom. I don't quite consider that sequential blooming, but it did produce a little bit more than what we see in the video here. Another thing about this orchid is you might have seen just earlier that some of the leaves are growing toward a different direction, and that was a quick experiment I did for its 2 newest leaves in 2019. I basically turned around 180 degrees so it's facing away from the light source, and then the new leaves were growing toward the light source. So that's just to give us some indication that, hey, if you want to train your leaves, just move around and have different light source direction, and that's how you can train the leaves to grow differently. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!